All right. Wow, right there in the middle of David Crowder. Hey, thank you for listening today to 88.1 FM. This is KBAP, the very best in modern praise and worship, here in our studio with Charles R. Fuqua, the King of Controversy. And we are excited to bring you our regular Thursday morning conservative chit-chat broadcast. And again, my name is Tony Hammock. King, you're the King of Controversy. I'm the Pragmatic Polarizer. Yeah, that's what we go by anyway.
You know, it's interesting. You talk about conservative. I was just following a website about, you know, I like Russia. So yeah, I study Russia a lot, and I was on a website. And in Russia, maybe not today, but say 10 years ago,
yeah,
to be a conservative Russian meant you were a hardcore communist. So the word has different connotations in different times and different places, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
You used the word one time that I wanted to find. You used the word capitalism.
Yeah.
And you like it. Yeah. And I think capitalism is the greatest evil the world has ever seen. Okay? Now, it depends on what your definition is. I believe when you use the term capitalism, what you're talking about is a free market economy.
Right.
Okay? But to me, those are two totally different things. Capitalism is a system where a few elite individuals are given the power and the privilege of creating money out of nothing, loaning it to the people and the government, and then having the people and the government pay them interest on what they created out of nothing. To me, that's capitalism.
Yeah, I think to me the word capitalism comes from the concept to capitalize.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, I had a background in athletics, and if I was trying to tackle a running back and he slipped in the mud, I would go like, yeah.
You capitalize.
I would capitalize on that, and I would take advantage of that moment in time when he made a mistake. Just like, you know, I've got some of my kids play basketball, and some of them handle the ball a lot, and, you know, if a defender took the wrong step, they wouldn't say, oh, hang on, let me let you get reset.
Yeah.
Hang on a second, let me let you get ready to play defense. It wouldn't be fair for me to go left hard right now when you stepped to my right too hard and you're off balance. So, to me, that's where the concept of capitalism comes from, is capitalizing on opportunities that may occur. And it was interesting, you know, some of the left, they've been, you know, doing and probably some of the right too, they've been doing the Donald Trump smear campaign. And one of the things that got him on record as saying was, well, you know, if the economy collapses, that'd be good for people like me.
Because I'm going to buy up the cheap property.
Yeah, because I'll go in there and snatch up those cheap properties or whatever's price is depressed. And I hate to break it to everybody, but that is capitalism. I mean, capitalism is capitalizing on...
Well, is that capitalism or is that a free market economy?
Well, I think it's both.
Yeah, see, when I think of capitalism, I think it comes from the term capital. Okay, and what is capital? It's money created out of nothing as a debt accounting entry. That's capital.
Okay.
Okay, now, you know, you can make the definition anything you want, I guess, but I always cringe when I hear the term capitalism.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's evil.
Yeah.
You know, the free market economy is the greatest thing on earth.
Yeah, well...
And we think the same thing when we're using totally different words.
Right. Yeah, so I'm really into the free market. You know, I think the free market should be allowed to be free. I don't know that it's the best system, but it sure seems to be the best system, you know, based on...
Well, let me tell you, one time I had an opportunity to have lunch with Rush Limbaugh's grandfather. Okay, who's a very interesting guy. He's a lawyer. He was well into his 90s at the time. And our discussion was how a free market economy, and I believe he referred to it as capitalism.
So I'm a good company.
Yeah, harnessed the potential of man, the greedy potential of man for the good of all. Because in a free market economy, you're not rewarded unless what you do benefits somebody else.
Right.
That's the way it works.
Right, in some measure, you have to figure out a way to do that. It's still at your own profit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, in the business world, it should be, in most cases, is win-win.
Right.
You know, when I go to my auto mechanic and I say, fix my car, and I wind up paying him $300, you could say, well, I'm out $300. But I got a running car now.
Yeah, right.
You know, so I've won.
Right.
And he's won. You know, that's the way it works.
Right. Amen.
Hey, I want to go back to something you just mentioned. That's about the media beating up Trump.
Yeah.
I want to talk about an interview between Megyn Kelly and Donald Trump. You know, they had a big falling out due to the first debate. And, you know, really after the first, well, I know if it was the first one, but it was the one where Megyn Kelly was the commentator, or the, I don't know what you call it, but anyway, mediator of the debate. And ever since that debate, my wife can't stand Megyn Kelly.
Really?
Yeah, because she said her questions to Donald Trump were unfair, they were gotcha questions. It was obvious that Megyn Kelly's goal was to take Donald Trump out of the race. I mean, that's all there is to it. You couldn't come to any other conclusion. That was what she was there for, to take Donald Trump out of the race. And if you think about it, if a journalist does that, well, you know, that's kind of a notch in their gun, a feather in their bonnet, however you want to put it. That's a good thing. Now, you know, Donald Trump, after he became the nominee, or the presumptive nominee, I think is the proper terminology at this point, Megyn Kelly went to Trump Towers and interviewed him. And in that interview, she asked him, she said, well, you know, you say some really harsh things about people. She said, do you ever think that some of the things you say about people may destroy their careers or even their lives? And as I heard her say that, I thought, Megyn, what do journalists build their careers on? What do you build your career on? It's on destroying people's lives, isn't it? Isn't that what journalism's really all about? If I can destroy somebody's life today, I've had a good day. And you know, what's funny, I can watch what's happening to Donald Trump, and most of us can see it's unfair media, you know, scrutiny on him. But what I've got the advantage of, I've lived through it. You know, I've been a political candidate. I have been destroyed so extensively in the press that I had friends tell me, you know, you're going to have to move probably out of the state. You know, because the smear on you is so bad, you probably can't even live here anymore. Well, I didn't do that. But it was terrible. Right. I mean, the only way I could describe it is demonic oppression. Unless you've lived through it, you don't know what I'm talking about. But I want to give some examples, and I've probably given some of these before. But my first exposure to the press was when I was, I must say, 13, 14 years old. My grandfather was a Baptist minister, and after he retired a full career of being a Baptist minister, for 20 years, every Sunday, he preached in a different Black Baptist church in St. Louis. He just loved black people. He loved preaching in black churches. He just loved it. I mean, he said there was an energy and an excitement there that you didn't find in white churches. Right. You know, and he just loved going to black churches. Anyway, it was when Martin Luther King was going all around the country, and wherever he'd go, there'd be riots and burnings and killings and whatnot. And the black ministers of St. Louis got together and they said, we don't want Martin Luther King to come to St. Louis, and we're going to oppose him coming to St. Louis. And anyway, and I'm not sure which of the St. Louis papers, because I was 13 or 14 at the time.
The Globe Democrat or the Post-Dispatch?
Yeah, and I don't even remember which one was the liberal and which was the conservative.
The Post-Dispatch was the liberal one.
Okay, well, it was probably the Post-Dispatch then. Printed a headline article talking about how much my grandfather wanted Martin Luther King to come to St. Louis. Well, now the interesting thing about that is, not only did he never say anything on the subject, nobody had ever asked him anything on the subject. It was totally made up without even interviewing him. Yeah. And I remember I was staying with him at the time, and he had one of these little school desks like they used to have and had his telephone on it. And he was sitting there, and he could not get that telephone hung up. And it was ringing again with another angry black pastor saying, "Why did you say that to the newspaper?" And he'd tell them, "I didn't say it. They never even interviewed me. It's all made up."
Wow.
You know, and then I was there when he called the newspaper, and it was the only time in my lifetime I ever heard my grandfather cuss.
Wow.
And he told the newspaper that what they printed was a damned lie. And they printed a little tiny retraction in little bitty
Page
print
12.
on the back page of the paper. You know, but that's when I learned about the honesty of the press.
Yeah.
And then when I was in office, I got to share this story. I was a state representative. I was the ultra conservative. And, you know, everybody considered me probably the most conservative guy in the legislature. And I was on a committee, Children and Families was the name of the committee. And there was a woman on the committee by the name of Sue Madison from Fayetteville. Now, Fayetteville always elected ultra-liberal people because they had the eggheads from the university voting, you know. And she was as liberal as they came. And we were just diametrically opposed on everything, you know. And one day, she was on this committee with me, and the chairman of the committee couldn't be there for some reason. And so she stepped in and chaired the committee. Now, you know, that's not really a big deal, chairing a committee. You know, anybody could have stepped up at a moment's notice and done it.
Right.
You know. But anyway, she chaired the committee. And when the meeting was over, a newspaper reporter came up to me and he said, "Well, how do you think Sue did chairing the committee?" And I said, "Well, she did okay." That was a headline in the newspaper. Charlie Fuqua praises Sue Madison for the job she did chairing the committee. You know, I mean, that's how they distort things. and I learned over and over again, like when I ran for state representative, I was the candidate that wanted to execute children.
I remember.
Okay, now, in all the polls, I was leading in the race. And then when the paper just over and over again came out about how I wanted to execute children, which was not true at all.
It's not?
No, it's not. I lost very substantially.
Yeah.
And the whole goal of that was destruction because they did not want a conservative in the legislature. And that's what the press does. I mean, the goal of the press is to destroy people. And so that's why it seems so ironic that Megyn Kelly would say that to Donald Trump.
Do you think maybe your perspective on the subject is a little bit skewed because of your personal experience?
No, I think I have an accurate perspective because of my personal experience.
Because like when I read the paper, you know, I don't read an article and think, oh, the point of this article is to destroy someone's life.
Yeah.
You know, I'll read an article and think, okay, they rescued a kitty cat from a tree. That's nice, you know,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think what happens with people is they all have their own agendas.
Yeah.
You know, and Fox likes to say there's, you know, or
Fair
O'Reilly,
and balanced.
fair and balanced. He says you're entering the no spin zone.
Yeah.
But the facts are, every single person has a world in life view that predisposes them to certain feelings and opinions that they are incapable of hiding. You just can't
That's
hide
true.
what you are. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't hide it. So if you're a left-wing radical wacko and you are all for abortion and you're all for gun control and you're all for all this, you know, socialism, you want more government, less freedom, if that's your thing and you're all into that, it's going to come through your reporting.
And somebody that's just the opposite, everything they do, you'll find something wrong with it.
Yeah. So,
If they give $6 million to veterans organizations, you'll find a way to criticize it.
yeah.
Isn't that what's just been happening?
Yeah, is that the Trump thing? He only gave $6 million.
Yeah, he gave $6 million to veterans organizations, or raised $6 million for veterans organizations, and they're criticizing him.
It's not enough.
Well, no, I'm not even sure what the criticism is. It's so crazy.
Yeah. But I think that's really the issue. I don't know that journalisms go to study journalism at the university so they can, you know, I'm going to destroy someone's life. I can't wait, you know.
Oh, I don't think, but they think this isn't, and here's what happens. Like when they took me out of the race, basically. Okay?
Yeah.
In their mind, they say, I have saved the world from this evil person.
Yeah, social justice warriors.
That's really what, like Megyn Kelly.
Yeah.
I'm going to save the world from Donald Trump. That was what was in her mind. I mean, Donald Trump is evil. He's bad. He will destroy the country. I'm going to save the world from Donald Trump. That's what she thought.
Maybe, yeah. It's hard to know exactly.
Yeah, well, but let's face it. It's if you take a presidential candidate out of the race, all your buddies in the press are going to say, "Hey, Meg, way to go! You took him out." Especially if it's somebody none of them like.
Yeah.
And let's face it, okay? The entire media, with maybe the exception of Sean Hannity, are sold out to the big banks or the money interests. They will not do anything other than what the money interests want them to do. And so they're gonna follow that line. Now it could be that since the money interest has controlled our educational system for 80 years, that they've just been educated in that and they can't think any other way. And think about this. We had a, quote, conservative George Bush that gave billions of taxpayer monies to the big banks to bail them out. That is the most immoral thing I can think of. Then we had a liberal, Barack Obama, give billions more to the big banks. Now, whose pocket are they in?
Right.
That's hard to ignore.
Yeah, I think that's why they call them parties. But you do. I think it's wise to follow the money. Like you're doing. You're talking. If the Democrats and the Republicans are both bought and paid for by the same special interests or the same big banks or the same money, who's really in charge? And I think it was Amschel Rothschild that said something to the effect of, "I don't really care who makes your laws if you give me control of your money supply."
Yeah. Let me create the money is what he said.
Yeah, if you let me create the money, I've got it. I'll take care of this situation, this governing business.
Yeah.
I'll have that under my thumb too.
Yeah. I say it all the time. If you can create money out of nothing, and that's what banks do,
Right.
you can buy the best politicians money will buy. And most of them are for sale. And a lot of them, they don't even realize they've been bought and sold. I got campaign contributions coming in. I must be a good guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember a situation where there was a picture on Facebook, and I think Barack Obama was just elected, and the church marquee said today was a victory for the homosexuals and a defeat for the unborn.
Yeah.
That was what the church marquee said, and then one of our local pastors made this comment that that was something like that was uncalled for, that was despicable, or that was this.
I think it's right on the money.
Well, I think I did too. I thought, well, yeah, that is right on the money. And then I made the comment. I tried to be merciful, and I put this comment out there like, well, what are you exactly referring to? The person that made the comment in front of you, or the actual marquee, what was in front of the church? Well, the marquee, of course, was the response, and I thought, I just dropped it because I didn't want to get into some big...
Yeah.
But I've even heard a guy that's, I think, an elder in a local church tell me he could exegete a passage to promote abortion.
Well,
I need to ask him.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, me too. I thought, wow, really? You can exegete a passage. And I think he threw the word exegete out there to kind of, knock me down a couple notches.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't know what that meant. I can exegete a passage. Oh, lovely. Which one? Are you going to talk to me about Pharaoh killing babies, or maybe Herod killing babies, or these other types of Satan that kill babies? Which one? Which one is for it?
But you didn't do that.
No,
you're too
no.
nice to do that, aren't you?
I don't do
See,
that. I do it on the radio. I bottle it up and vent it out to the thousands of our listeners.
See, that's the difference between you and me, Tony. I don't bottle it up. I attack.
Yeah, I have a tendency to temper my words often, and I think it usually serves me well. I think occasionally there may be times when I need to just let it fly.
Yeah. Well, if my wife is listening to this broadcast, she would, when we get home, she'll say, Charlie, you ought to do like Tony does and temper your words.
Yeah. I have a friend who's told me he did a big study on wisdom. And last night at our church, at Jubilee Family Church, we did a talk on wisdom from Proverbs chapter 3. Anyway, he said, I can tell you what wisdom's all about. He said, I've studied it and studied it and studied it in the Bible, especially in Proverbs. And he says, I can boil it down to 3 words. He said, you want to know what that is? I said, yeah, sure, what do you got? He said, shut your mouth.
There is some truth in
He
that.
said, shut your mouth. But a lot of times for me, I've noticed over the years, if I speak out of an emotionally charged state, I can regret things. I think, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have said that. That was over the top, or that was too much. But if I keep my cool, try to keep my composure, it just seems like I have much better mastery over my intellect, and I'm able to say things the way I want to say them, and not saying with regrets. Because sometimes you can paint with a broad brush when you're emotional, and then alienate a whole bunch of people and not mean to, and then you think, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have done that. Why did I say it that way? But then too, at the same time, there's a time just when you need to just tell it.
Let me ask you something about wisdom. Do you believe there's such a thing as evil wisdom?
Yeah, I think there are like people like Nathan Rothschild, the guy that lied about, what was it, the Battle of England or something, some kind of battle?
Oh, it was the Battle of Waterloo, where Wellington fought Napoleon, and he had spies over in France, and he sent word back that the English had lost the battle when they had really won it.
Right.
And it caused the stock market in London to just fall through the floor, and then he bought everything up for pennies on the dollar.
That's it. That's evil wisdom right there.
That is evil wisdom.
And I've heard too, and I think I may have mentioned this on the radio, but there's a corporation, I think it's the Cerberus Corporation. And, the Cerberus was I think in Greek mythology, was a mythological dog with 2 or 3 heads with a snake, like a cobra tail with a poisonous snake, and it guarded the gates of hell. So that tells you.
Is that so nobody snuck in?
Yeah, or snuck out. I don't know. But if I'm not mistaken, George Soros is connected to that corporation, and what they would do is they would, and I don't know if this has happened multiple times or just one time, or even if it's true, but this would be a hypothetical. Let's say it's a hypothetical example of evil wisdom. The snow would fall in the Rocky Mountains on the east side of the Rockies, and it was very measurable, and it was very, you could tell how much snow had fallen. They had all kinds of systems out there to measure that, and they had floodgates to release floodwaters. Well, somehow the floodgates were held back too long, and the floodwaters were released, and they flooded a bunch of farmland, and a bunch of this farmland to the east of the Rockies was underwater, and so representatives from this corporation went to these farmers and said, hey, I'm interested in buying your land. Would you
You're in trouble.
I just happen to notice that you're in trouble. Would you be interested in selling? And some farmers were very well prepared for a year of total flooding, and they could weather that storm and say, hey, get off my land, I'm not interested. But other farmers weren't well prepared, and they knew that in advance, of course, and so then they went in and they bought up the land for pennies on the dollar, and were able to get rural real estate very cheap. Mm-hmm. So
great agricultural land,
yes,
by the way.
Yes. So that's evil wisdom. There's a wisdom out there that is, capitalistic in nature.
By the way, I think you missed part of that story. Didn't Soros gain control of when that water was released and it caused the flood?
Yeah.
I don't know that you said that.
No, it was implied. I wanted our listeners to connect their dots.
Well, that's what happened, though.
It would seem that was the case. Yeah, that someone had control over those floodgates, and that they used that flood to their advantage. It's kind of like the what's that guy? Rahm Emanuel. They call it the Emanuel Doctrine.
Yeah. Never. What is it?
Never let a good catastrophe go to waste.
Yeah.
So
even if you got to cause the catastrophe.
Well, that would be a false flag attack, and that would be a little bit more evil, I would say.
Yeah.
Like in Connecticut, as horrible as that experience, that those kids were shot. They had some crazy guy come into the school, shot a bunch of precious children. Just an absolute horrible thing. But the left immediate thing was to capitalize on that event and call for gun control. So that would be, to me, an example of the Emmanuel Doctrine at work. And actually Hillary Clinton's quoted Rahm kind of tongue-in-cheek, like, ha ha ha, that's great, yeah. We think this is a good idea. Where to me the false flag attack would be, you don't just let a catastrophe go to waste, but you create the catastrophe. It'd be like the Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution. So let's say, again, your agenda is to control firearms. You don't want American citizens to own guns. So you send crazy people into a school secretly to kill people, and then you look what these guns did.
Even if you got to hypnotize them and brainwash them.
If we had a better,
and you know that, I guess that's the how can I put that? That's the radical in me that believes they would go that far, and I think they would.
Well, there's some really interesting research on mind control out there. If you haven't looked at that research, to hear you say that, to hear me say what I'm going to say, is going to be like, these guys are kooks, you know.
Yeah.
But when you actually see the research and watch it, they did a study where they tried to see how far they could push one person to harm another person, and they videotaped the entire thing.
I've seen some of this.
And the guy says, okay, here's what I want you to do. When this guy over here gives a wrong answer,
shocking.
I want you to give him a shock. Yeah. And there was a curtain, and he never saw the other man. But then he's got this electrical shocking meter, 1 to 10. So he says, okay, he asks him some kind of question. He says, I'm sorry, that's the wrong answer. Ah! Ow! The guy on the other side of the curtain makes a squeaky noise, So they get through 7 or 8 more questions, and he's missed some more, and every time he gets another one wrong, he has to increase the intensity, So he gets to like level 7, and there's a doctor standing there, and you always have to have an official person to get people to do stuff. If you have a guy without a uniform on, it doesn't work. But the minute you put somebody in some kind of uniform, if they have a badge or not, or a special name tag or something, that people will do it. So there's a doctor standing over this guy's shoulder in a white lab coat. I don't know if he had a stethoscope, but he looked like a doctor. And he says, you have to do it.
Now, the guy on the other side of the curtain's not getting shocked at all, right?
Right, yeah. But he's acting like he is. So, but the guy doesn't know that.
Yeah.
He believes he's really shocking the guy. So he gets to 7, and the guy's like, hey, stop! He's begging him, don't shock me again. Please, stop! And the guy's he's stressing out. He doesn't want to shock him, but then he looks at the doctor, and the doctor looks at him and says, you have to do it. Okay. And he shocks him again. So then it gets so intense, the guy starts saying he's got a pacemaker. My heart's beating funny. Stop, I got a pacemaker. And he's saying all this stuff on the other side of the curtain, and the guy's panicking, because he doesn't want to shock the guy again. But the doctor says, you've got to do it. And he goes, okay. and then they hear the guy hit the floor, and he's, the guy that's doing the shocking is looking all around. But what it was a study on how the question was how come people would hurt other people, And then, just following orders. I'm just following orders.
And they do it.
I'm just following orders. And hey, eventually somebody's got to say, I'm responsible for my own actions.
Yeah. When you think about the Nazi concentration camps and whatnot, they were following orders.
Right, just following orders. So all that research and all that, the human psychology behind massive manipulation and all that, it's very, very real. It's very interesting. And again, I'll tell you another story that's kind of interesting. They did in the corporate world, to drive sales. They would bring in focus groups to try and figure out why people would or wouldn't do certain things. So Betty Crocker, I guess it was in the 40s or the 50s, they came out with the cake mix.
Yeah.
And in the cake mix were all the ingredients you needed to make a cake except water. So you could just take this cake mix, dump it in a bowl, add water, and stir it.
And you got a cake.
And bake it.
A wonderful cake.
Yeah, everything's perfect in that cake. So they put it on the shelves, and no one would buy it, or very few people would buy this product. So they brought in these focus groups, these women, and they asked them, basically why is it that you won't buy this great product? And what they found out was that the women had latent guilt in their hearts toward the product because it was too easy. They felt like their husbands were at work all day working really hard to provide for the family. The kids were at school working hard all day. They were at home. They felt like they needed to be doing some work too. And so the cake, their guilt complex and the cake didn't work out together. So they They wouldn't buy it. They just felt guilty by making it so easy. So what Betty Crocker did was they went back and they just said, okay, let's take an egg out of the mix. So now to this day,
You got to
find an egg and put an egg in there, and the product flew off the shelves.
Yeah.
So
But they can put powdered eggs in there and you get the same outcome.
pretty much, yeah,
Yeah.
they could, and it might work in today's culture.
It might today.
Yeah, I know. I shared that story with my wife, and she said, "Man, they could put that egg right back in there. It wouldn't bother me a bit." You know?
Yeah, but now your wife doesn't have that guilt complex of being at home while you're working.
No, she works very hard. I'll tell you another mind control thing that happened was in the 20s, maybe it was in the 30s, but it was with cigarettes. The cigarette manufacturers noticed that it was, in our culture, it was very taboo for women to smoke. It was like, women just didn't do it. It was considered dirty, you know. So the tobacco manufacturers were like, hey,
That's we could double our
we
market.
could double our sales if we could just get women to smoke. So what they did was they found out that there were certain psychological things inside of women at that time that they could capitalize on. So what they did was they found out that there was like a latent, innate desire for women to be equal with men. That women wanted to be equal with men. And that was something in that time was very, very important to women. And so they hired all these actresses and athletes and very prominent women, and they put them down in Times Square, and they brought in all the newspaper reporters, and this was way before the internet and all that, and they took all these photographs of these prominent, successful women lighting up for liberty. You know, like, we're equal. We can do this. We're equal with men. And women all over America
Lit up.
started smoking. Yeah. Yeah, they brainwashed them, basically. They convinced them,
Like that.
this is what you need to do. Because if you don't smoke, men are better than you.
Yeah.
No, they're not. You know, and that was the psychology of how they got them to start smoking. And it's that kind of thing goes on. I mean, I think it was John F. Kennedy that broke up a plan to create a false flag attack on Florida by a Cuban invasion. You know, the United States' foreign policy, we needed to, and this is all on record, you can look this stuff up, but we needed to get Cuba out of being communist. It was a strategic place. It was the first strike for missiles. It was very bad for U.S. defense, and we needed to get Cuba to not be there, you know, as Cuba the way it was. So according to what I've read, the CIA had a plan to have Cubans attack Florida, but it wasn't really going to be Cubans.
And so we could attack back.
So we could strike back and take Cuba. Yeah, say, look what they did. They attacked us. So now we've got to go attack them. You know, and justify it as a false flag attack.
Yeah.
But from everything I read, Kennedy intervened and said, no, we're not doing that.
But see, you know my solution for Cuba. I think I told you that before. Putin's going into Ukraine. Okay? We're not going to stop Putin from going into Ukraine. We can talk about it, but we're not going to stop Putin.
Yeah.
Putin's going to take Ukraine, at least half of it, because he's got to have a corridor to the Black Sea. He's got to have that seaport. You know, Russia has to have that. You know,
didn't the Ukrainian citizens vote already?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Russia come in?
no, that was Crimea. You remember Crimea is a little peninsula into the Black Sea off of Ukraine. And there was a naval base that Russia had leased for like 100 years or something, and it's not near up. But anyway, Crimea has voted to be part of Russia. And now, really about half of Ukraine wants to be part of Russia. Because they're Russian people, they speak Russian, they're Russian Orthodox by religion, you know. The other half wants to go with Poland because they're Catholic and whatnot. You know, there's all kinds of dynamics going on. But anyway, we're not going to stop Russia from taking Ukraine.
Yeah.
We're not going to do it. You know, we can complain and whatnot. But rather than complain, we should have said, hey, Vlad, bless you in the Ukraine. We're taking Cuba. I mean, let's get smart about something here.
Yeah. Sound like Donald Trump.
Hey, let's negotiate. You take Ukraine, we take Cuba. I mean, and I know there's people probably saying, oh, invading a sovereign country. You know, I get really sick of how can I put this? People that are so darn stuck in the platitudes that they can't be practical. And I'm going to give you another example of that. I spoke at a church not long ago. on Islam. And I said that the solution in the United States to the Muslim problem is to exclude all Muslims from the United States. And I'm telling you, the church was with me, except for the pastor. And he's raising all kinds of objections. He says, first of all, well, how are we going to witness to him if we throw him out of the country? And then he says, no, wait a minute. He says,
say, wait, are you witnessing to him now?
Yeah, you're probably not.
Probably not.
But then he says, well, doesn't our Constitution give freedom of religion? How do you do that? Well, now, how do you give freedom of religion to a group that says, we're not letting anybody have freedom of religion? As a matter of fact, we're going to kill everybody that doesn't follow our religion, and we've been doing it for 1,400 years, and we're going to continue to do it. How do you give them freedom of religion? If you do, there is no freedom of religion. At some point, you got to have a little sense.
Yeah.
You can't live in this world of absolutes like that.
You think the pastor will have you back?
I think, well, he's already invited me back.
Oh, good.
Actually. Yeah,
Good.
he's already invited me back. But you know, at some point you gotta, the Constitution was never intended to be a suicide pact.
No.
And as a matter of fact, I would argue that by freedom of religion, what they really intended to protect was Christian denominations.
From the government, right?
Yeah.
From the
And
government,
they were
state
not
government.
inviting in some religion that wanted to overthrow the United States government
Militarily.
and kill all Christians. That's not what they intended to do with the Constitution.
Yeah.
But that's what we're doing with it today.
Yeah, the original intent, I think David Barton would applaud your angle, because I think that's the right way to read the Constitution. I don't think you read it like it's a living, organic document, like some people proclaim it to be. To me, the Constitution had an original intent based on the time that it was written and the founders' opinions and what were they thinking, why did they say that. And that's how we should interpret the Constitution today.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to say, now I think it means this, but I'm going to admit that it never meant that, then I think intellectually you can do that. If you want to say it never was intended to say this, ever, but I'm saying it is, then you can say that. You can say what you want. But that's, I think, with integrity, most people will detach from that. They'll say, well, I know what it used to mean and what it was originally intended to mean, and now you're saying it means something different, and you agree that it was never intended to say that.
Well,
I
see,
can't go there.
our current Supreme Court says we should interpret the Constitution not by the times in which it was written, but by today.
Yeah, I would disagree with that.
I would totally disagree with it, but that's the approach they take. And it's not only, it's not that they would say, we should interpret it by the cultural norms of today. We should interpret it by the cultural norms of those of us who sit on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. I want to get back to Trump. He's given this list of Supreme Court justices. And I don't know what schools they went to, but if I was given a list, there wouldn't be a single person on that list that graduated from Harvard or Yale. Because there's not a single person on the Supreme Court today that graduated from anywhere but Harvard and Yale. And I think we got way too much of Harvard and Yale. As a matter of fact, do you know there's no constitutional requirement that to sit on the Supreme Court you be a lawyer? There isn't one. And if I was picking people, you know who I would pick? I would pick a farmer, a school teacher, an engineer, a guy that picks up trash on the back of the garbage truck. I think we'd get better decisions than we've got today. And we stick a copy of the Constitution in their back pocket, and maybe let them have a copy of the Federalist Papers and say, now don't you stick your nose in any other books. Don't you read anything but what's right here. We'd have a lot better decisions.
Yeah.
You don't have to be very bright to be on the Supreme Court. You just do whatever you want. Isn't that what they do?
Yeah.
They just make stuff up and do whatever they want.
Yeah. That's true.
Once you're on the Supreme Court, you can shut your brain off.
You make laws.
Yeah, I think the law ought to be that boys and girls in high schools ought to be forced to shower together. Well, that's where we are today.
I heard that Asa Hutchinson, our governor, really came out against that idea, the transgender bathroom thing. He told our school administrators to disregard the president of the United States on that. Don't.
He said he does not have the authority to order that.
Yeah.
Is what he said, and he's right.
Yeah, of course he does. He can only execute the existing laws.
Yeah, he says he's going to withhold federal funds for any school that doesn't force the girls to shower with the boys.
Yeah,
He doesn't have authority to do that. And some people listening to this may think we're crazy and even, what are they talking about? But the way President Obama interprets it, if I show up as a high school student today, a male high school student, and I say, I feel feminine today.
Yeah.
I want to shower with the girls.
Yeah, I want to use the girls' restroom.
Yeah, you have to force the girls to shower with him. Well, if I was a guy in high school today, I'd feel feminine every day.
Yeah, that's so weird.
I mean, it's just sick.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird that we're even talking about this.
But that's where we are.
Yeah. I heard someone say, with Hillary, at least we know what we're going to get. With Trump, we got this big question.
Yeah, but what we know we're going to get with Hillary is really, really bad.
That's my take too. That's what I was going to say.
I've got to agree with that.
We know we're going to get a Supreme Court justice that's appointed that's definitely going to be pro-choice, pro-abortion.
Yeah.
We know we're going to get a Supreme Court justice that's pro-gun control. We know we're going to get a Supreme Court justice that's pro-socialism, more leaning that way. Hillary's not Bernie Sanders, but she's definitely leaning that way.
Yeah.
She hasn't come out of the closet like Bernie and said she's a socialist.
I really believe, how can I put this? I believe Bernie is honest in being a socialist.
He would seem to have integrity.
Yeah, I believe he's honest. I believe Hillary, the only, people use different words to describe Hillary, and the word most used is dishonest. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, that's not the word I'd use. I'd use evil.
Yeah.
I think she's one of the most evil human beings that have ever walked the face of the earth. And her whole life is pure evil.
You think she's worse than Hitler?
I think if she had the power, she would be worse than Hitler. I really believe it. I believe there's been a lot of people on earth that, if given the power, would be just like Hitler or worse than Hitler. Now I say that. Now remember, Hitler was also a methamphetamine addict, and his mind was being destroyed daily by methamphetamine progressively as the war went on. So he was getting more insane by the day.
I heard he had syphilis too.
I don't know about that, but he was a methamphetamine addict. And when you use methamphetamine, you've got to always increase the dosage. And if you're on methamphetamine, you're nuts. You're nuts. And Hitler was nuts. Now, he was probably nuts before he started using methamphetamine, but it didn't help. But I believe Hillary is as evil as Hitler is, or was. I don't know that I mean, she cannot speak the truth. She sees nothing wrong with murdering babies to sell their body parts for profit. Just to give you an example, our county judge here, Robert Griffin, lifelong Democrat, elected Democrat as the county judge. When the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton came out and they said, yeah, we know that Planned Parenthood is harvesting body parts from aborted babies to sell them, and we're okay with that. That's when Robert Griffin said, I can't do this anymore. I cannot associate myself with a party that thinks that's okay. And he left the party. And I've got to applaud him for it. I think that's character. Yeah. But they can't see anything. If you can't see anything wrong with killing a child to sell their body parts for profit, I think you're evil. I don't know any way to look at that. And like in the Mideast, in Muslim countries, it's not unusual for Muslims to capture Christians, to slaughter them to harvest their organs for sale. They're doing it right now in the Mideast. I think that's evil. But to a Muslim, since Christians are not, the word
Kufar.
kafar actually means, and I tell you who I learned this from.
Property, right?
No, kafar means excrement.
Hmm.
That's so. So if they say you're kafar, you are excrement. Well, now how valuable is that?
Yeah, I watched a video of a guy just describing. He was an Arabic imam, a Muslim imam, and he was describing kufar as property. He said you're like a dog walking down the street without a collar. You know, you're just fair game. You know, if someone wants to kill you, they can kill you. If they want to put a collar on you, make you their dog, you can become their dog. Just whatever they want to do with you. It's up to them.
But you know, in Muslim countries, they kill all dogs.
Yeah, they don't. Muhammad didn't like dogs.
No,
right?
Muhammad didn't like dogs.
Yeah.
So for all you pet lovers out there, if you think we'd be fun as a Muslim country, your dogs are all going to be killed.
Terrible.
Hey, I want to go into something else with Trump.
All right.
Okay? And you will probably hear this. Trump in the past has been pro-life.
Yeah. Pro-choice.
And that's, excuse me, pro-choice.
Yeah.
You're right. Pro-choice. And you're probably going to hear commercials aired of him saying, I'm pro-choice, because he said that. Okay? Now, he claims he's made a transformation. Now, is that real or is that fake for political purposes? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't either.
Okay? But let me kind of go through that as to what happened. In 1999, he had an interview with Tim Russert, and here's Russert's commercial. Partial birth abortion, the eliminating of abortion in the third trimester. Big issue in Washington. Would President Trump ban partial birth abortion? Now here's Trump's answer. Well, look, I'm very pro-choice. I hate the concept of abortion. I hate it. I hate everything it stands for. I cringe when I hear people debating the concept.